Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our first session for the year. And in particular, welcome to Bhante Sanathavihari visiting us from LA from US. And today I'm really excited, as many are, about the topic, because the topic for today is on Meditation Smorgasbord, a tour of Theravada, Mahayana and Vajrayana meditations. So I'm really looking forward to it, especially after hearing from Bhante as to what he'll be taking us through, this journey through the different traditions. So without further ado, let's pass it over to Bhante. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. And so happy to be here with everyone for the first session of this new year. We have many resolutions. I hope that you're able to keep true to them to the best of your ability, and maybe hopefully one of those is to, deepen your Dhamma practice, your meditation practice, your spiritual practice, and even just, self-care. Self-care. So with that in mind, I'm going to offer a platter of different meditations that I've come across that I found useful and also pleasant and joyful. And, I think another important thing is for just taking into account the kind of world that we find ourselves in is harmony, social harmony, and unity. So as Buddhists, we talk a lot about peace and compassion. And I think we need to start at home within, Buddhists need to get along with other Buddhists. So I think this is one way of me doing that, right? So we're not so sectarian and dogmatic to kind of be like, look, there's this Theravada monk who's going to show you Mahayana meditation and Vajrayana meditation. And these are my own practices too that I do, right? I practice these too. So I want to share that with you and kind of give you permission to explore Buddhism. So with that in mind, let's just find our meditation seat. Let's find our posture. So try to get nice and comfy as possible. But at the same time, we want to have an upright posture. So upright posture with our shoulders down and our chest open and back as straight as possible. And this just helps us from, kind of getting drowsy or falling over ourselves when we're meditating, from leaning to the left or the right. And we will begin with taking it all the way back to the meditation that the Buddha used himself on the night of enlightenment, which is said to be anapanasati, right? Mindfulness, awareness of the in and out breath. So we can begin by withdrawing our attention from the external environment and redirecting our attention to the breath. So we begin to gather our attention and we direct it to the breath. So we just want to become mindful of the breath. We want to observe the breath. And the first stages of mindfulness of the breath have to do with awareness of the body, mindfulness of the body. So we use the breath as an instrument to become more mindful of the body. So when we breathe in, we want to feel the breath breathing in. When we breathe out, we want to feel the breath breathing out. We observe the breath via the bodily sensations, the tactile sensations. So bring your attention to feeling the breath via the body. We don't want to think about the breath. So let go of any noting or any counting of the breath. Just be with the raw sensation, the raw experience of breathing in and breathing out. This is called Kayanupassana, observing the body. Feel the breath. If your mind wanders, no worries. Just gently bring your attention back to the breath. We're working on directing our attention and sustaining our attention. So the mind wanders, we direct it back to the breath, and we try to sustain it on the breath. So let go of any future plans or fantasies or any worries about the past. Let go of any sounds or anything going around you, any activities in your environment, and just be with the breath itself. And you might begin to notice differences in the breath. Some inhalations and exhalations are long. Some of them are short. And we become aware of the differences in the breath. We don't want to control the breath. Just breathe naturally. But be mindful whether the breath is long or short. Feeling the breathing in and feeling the breathing out. Noticing differences in the breath. Feeling the breathing in, feeling the breathing out. And as we do this, we want to be increasingly more mindful every time of the breath, of the totality of the breath. So I invite you to try to be mindful of the entire breath from the moment that it enters your nostrils and it peaks by filling up your lungs, and then starts coming out of your lungs and through your nostrils and leaves your body. Try to encompass the entire breath. Feel the entire breath. You might notice different movements throughout your body, throughout your torso, in your chest and your abdomen. The cool sensation of the breath as it enters your nostril. You might even feel it in the back of your throat. So try to become completely aware of the entire breath. Mind wanders, no worries. Gently bring it back. No need to control the breath. Just breathe naturally. No need to note or count or think about the breath. Just only be with the body. Breathing in, breathing out. And for the next step, we want to practice stillness, calming the bodily activities. So here we begin to become aware of bodily feelings in the sense of pleasant and unpleasant feelings. So as we breathe in and breathe out, the breath remains as our anchor to the present moment. But we take a look throughout our body and see if there's any pleasant or unpleasant feelings. And as we do this, we want to do it from a place of being deeply rooted in the breath. That means that we avoid reacting to any of these feelings. Just for the moment, we avoid reacting to any kind of impulses in the body, any bodily urges, whether pleasant or unpleasant. So if we feel an itch, we try to patiently be with it and just observe that itchy feeling that's a little bit uncomfortable. We might observe any unpleasant feelings, maybe on our seat or our back or our legs, depending how we're sitting. And we just learn to be with that too as we breathe in and breathe out. So any kind of discomfort that arises, we just kind of want to be with it and observe it without shifting the body, without making any movements. And we learn to be with this feeling, this unpleasant feeling. And we can see it arise. We can see its duration. And if we're patient, we can see it's passing away. Just like the breath that comes and goes, pleasant and unpleasant feelings in the body, they also come and go. And for the final step in this meditation, we will now focus on any pleasant feelings that arise when you're breathing in and breathing out. So as we become more mindful of the body, more aware of the entire body, we might notice some pleasant sensations, even in the breath itself, breathing in, breathing out. And if you pay attention, you might notice that it's very subtle, and not reacting and not giving in to these impulses of discomfort. There's a subtle pleasure there too, of not being pulled around, of not being controlled, of letting them go. Oh, there is joy there. This is pleasant. This is pleasurable. Mindfulness of the breathing in and breathing out, mindfulness of the body, being with unpleasant feelings and rejoicing and basking in the pleasant feelings. Any little subtle relief from discomfort that you find, that is a pleasant feeling. You can notice it, observe it. If we pay attention to it, it increases the pleasantness. And now we will gently, slowly transition to a Mahayana practice that we find in the Chan school. That many of you might know in its Japanese form called Zazen or Shikantaza. So unlike this anapanasati, where we have an object of awareness, we are mindful of something. In this Chan practice, in this Zen practice, we let go of any object. This is an objectless meditation. And in fact, it is said that it is not even a meditation, because we will no longer do anything. We will stop doing and just be. And within the Chan tradition, it is the way to practice this is with our eyes open. So, just very slowly, you can start gently opening your eyes, but not all the way. You can open your eyes about 50%. You can open your eyelids about 50% and gently gaze over your lap, over your knees, over your feet. So as we do this, we also want to avoid any bodily movements. And Zen, the posture in itself, is a kind of manifestation of awakening. So with our eyes open about 50%, gently gazing down. And we want to have an open awareness. We don't want to focus on anything in particular, since there are no objects in this meditation. And we learn just to be with what is. So let go of the breath. Let go of the body. Open your mind up to the totality of experience. Just sitting. No doing. Wake up! And now we will transition to the next tradition, Vajrayana. And for this practice that I will share with you, we can either leave our eyes open or close them. I'll leave that up to you. And before we start, we might want to check in with our posture again, making sure that we're seated comfortably and have an upright posture. And we'll bring our attention back to the breath. So become mindful of the in and out breathing. Breathing in and breathing out. And as we become more mindful of the in and out breathing, we can imagine that the room that we're sitting in is filled with like dark clouds or dark smoke. So take a few moments to imagine your surroundings just filled with either a dark cloud or dark smoke. And then we can imagine us breathing in that dark cloud or dark smoke. So breathing in this dark cloud, breathing out this dark cloud. Breathing in this dark smoke and breathing out this dark smoke. So we take it in and we release it. And this dark cloud or smoke is just a stand-in for all the dukkha, all the suffering in the world. We open our hearts up to all the suffering and we release it. So you can imagine yourself breathing in this suffering, breathing in this dark cloud of the suffering of sentient beings and releasing. Breathing in this dark cloud or mist or smoke of suffering and letting it go. It is not for you to hold. It is not your suffering. So there is this dark cloud or dark smoke surrounding us, surrounded by the pain and suffering of sentient beings. We breathe it in, we let it go and breathe it out. And for the next step, as we breathe in all this pain, all this suffering of this dark cloud, on the out breath, we send out loving kindness and compassion. Breathing in their suffering, breathing out compassion. And as we breathe out, we can imagine our entire body radiating light in all directions. This light of compassion that begins to overcome and push away all this dark cloud, this dark smoke around us. Breathing in their suffering, breathing out compassion. Breathing in this dark smoke and breathing out, radiating in all directions this light of compassion. You can imagine your entire body being like the sun and illuminating the entire world. Every time you breathe out, your body radiates compassion in all directions. Sending out loving kindness and compassion to all beings. Breathing in the suffering, breathing out compassion. Breathing in the dark, breathing out the light. And we will bring this meditation to a close. by bringing it to a meditation that is shared by all traditions, which is meditation on the Buddha. Whether it's in thinking about Amitabha, thinking about Sakyamuni, Amitayus, the Bodhisattvas. We are always, in all traditions, reminded to bring to mind the awakened beings. So at this moment, I would invite you to, whichever kind of chanting that you know, whether it's the Nembutsu, whether it's Namo Amitabha, whether it's Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhase, or just Buddha. In your mind, take this last minute to recite some chanting where you talk about the Buddha and bring to mind any Buddha's noble qualities. Let's do that for the last minute of this meditation. Buddha Nusati, thinking about the Buddha. So we can just take a minute, to come back, perhaps stretch or do whatever you need to do. As we transition to where I talk a lot. Okay, I hope everyone is alert. So as I said earlier, and I think maybe half of our friends, our online friends weren't here, my idea of this kind of today's theme was in order to just create more understanding and more interest in the different ways that the different traditions approach the practice and the Dhamma. The world is very dichotomized right now. It seems like we have fallen into what the Buddha warned us about, the two extremes that should be avoided. And as Buddhist, or at least we think of ourselves many times, and I hear this in many places, that Buddhists are very peaceful, and we're very accepting, and we're very compassionate and very open-minded. But, you know, regularly I come across a lot of conceit and sectarianism, or like, we're the real Buddhist, or this is the real Buddhist practice, and they're not. They're doing cultural stuff. We're doing the real Buddhism. Or those Buddhists over there are doing some superstitious practice, some shamanistic practices, and you know, we're doing something else. And then even within the own tradition of Theravada, you have the Vipassana jhana, and you have the forest and the city monks, and everywhere we go, we find this. We create divisions. And it's difficult to get different groups of Buddhists together. You know, that's one of the things I enjoy about Metta Center. You know, you get all different traditions here are represented, even non-traditions. Right? So that's also good. Because it rarely happens. You know, even within the own Theravada tradition, most monasteries are, you know, ethnically centered for a specific ethnicity. And I understand the practicality of it, right? But you know, sometimes these centers have been around for 20, 30 years, and it still continues that way, right? Although the environment has changed, although their children are basically now Australian, Canadians, Americans, whatever, the temple has stayed the same. It remains closed. So I wanted to kind of give you a little taste of the different practices. I mean, there's just very few practices that I shared with you right now, and these are the ones that I've found useful in my own practice and my own path in the Dhamma. I started off actually sitting first, formal meditation in the Zen tradition, in the Soto Zen tradition. Then from there, I went to a Soto/Rinzai tradition where they did both, a Western version of both of those. Then a few months later, I went to a Sri Lankan Theravada temple. And then I made a friend who is a Western Lama. And for about the first 2 years, I practiced with him too. And I was surprised how everyone was so certain that their way is the right way, you know, in all these places, or ours is the fastest, with no one actually being an arahant themselves, or a Sammasambuddha themselves, right? So if someone were to tell me, oh, I am a Sammasambuddha, I'm an arahant, so I know for myself that this is the only way. You know, maybe there's something to it. But an unenlightened person saying that this is the only way is very suspicious for me. It just seemed like more dogmatism, right? This is what I like. This is what I know. This is what's familiar. This is what I've dedicated so much time to. So it has to be right, because I've invested too much now. And this closes our minds, and we don't want to open our minds to doing things differently. And I feel this is part of what closes us off to other traditions, right? What if I'm wrong? What if they're right? All this time I dedicated going to my temple, following my teacher, and I was mistaken. I mean, that's not a bad problem to have, you know? If you find something that works, you're on the way to Nibbana. I mean, you know, if you wasted all that time, it's better that you know now, right? And I've never actually found it to be that extreme of a case. I've always gone to other traditions, and I've always found things that support my current practice. Right? It's not like I have to choose one or the other. I have to switch teams. It's just now I have like even more ice cream flavors to choose from to complement my other practices. So by practicing Zen, it has greatly and significantly impacted my practice of Satipatthana, and in many ways helped me understand it in a different way than the kind of different or the kind of ways that it's presented to us in the West, at least, of how to practice Satipatthana or Vipassana or whatever we want to call it, Anapanasati. It really helped me see it in a different light. And for me, the practice of Metta Bhavana, loving kindness meditation, it was never my first choice. You know, I wasn't always very excited about it. I didn't see myself as a very like cuddly person. So then the imagery, right, and the kind of somatic aspect of Tonglen really helped me, you know, because then it's kind of like a virtual reality that I'm creating, right? And, you know, I've always been a fan of movies, and you get completely absorbed by movies, right? You get taken in. The movies move you. That's why we all go to the cinema. I mean, nowadays we just watch things on Amazon Prime, but so like creating this whole scenery, this virtual reality, was easier for me to feel that concern for the well-being of others, to create this, feel it in my body and use kind of more of my senses than just like, may all beings be well. And I didn't have to choose between Tonglen and Metta Bhavana, you know, I could still practice both, although I still kind of stick more with Metta now. Thanks to Tonglen, I've been able to really have a deeper practice of Metta Bhavana. And then the last practice that I shared with you, the one I invited you to practice, thinking about the Buddha, is one that we find in every tradition. Every single tradition has this. Thinking about the Buddha, Buddha Nusati, which I think is the one that's lacking for most Western Buddhist or convert Buddhist or secular Buddhist or whatever label we want to use. That one's really missing. And when I would go to traditional ethnic temples, or in my time in Vietnam, Cambodia, Sri Lanka, that seemed to be the main practice for everyone. Everyone saw so much devotion to the Buddha all the time. I mean, there's whole schools, right? You think about the Chinese Pure Land School and the Japanese Pure Land, Korean Pure Land schools. The main emphasis is to think about the Buddha. They're always chanting, right? Amitabha Buddha. Oh, they have other ways of saying it, like Om Mani Padme Hum in the Vajrayana tradition. But the basic concept is the same. Think about the Buddha. I feel like that is the thing that unites all of us. Our deep faith, right? Our deep conviction, our deep trust in the Buddha. How we imagine him, right? With a Chinese face or an Indian face is besides the point. Where he's wearing yellow robes or orange robes is besides the point. But that you in your mind, right, understand that that there is a being that was completely free from all suffering. And he taught the way from freedom from suffering. That's something that we can all unite around, regardless of how we bow, what language we chant in, whatever ethnicity or language we happen to use. And so many practices that, you know, that I couldn't share to you, that I didn't share with you because I didn't think it'd be appropriate, like the practice of koan that I learned in Rinzai Zen. Actually, Linji, the Chinese, his real name, not Rinzai in Japanese, is my favorite Chan teacher. I love Linji. He was such a rascal or something. I don't know, lack of a better word. He's a funny guy. And I like his directness. you know? And for koan practice, it's like an anusati. It's something that you live by, right? There's this kind of, I don't even want to call it a question because it's not about finding an answer, but there is this thing that you chew over, right? Like if you were to have gum and you have to chew on it from the moment that you wake up until you go to sleep, and you just chew on it and chew on it and chew on it, right? It becomes something that you live in and you abide in. Until eventually you have to surrender. You have to give up trying to solve the puzzle. And that release, I imagine, is like when Ananda gave up. I won't become an arahant. This is the last night. I'm just going to go to bed now. And as he laid down, he became an arahant, right? That's the koan right there. Just when you think it's all over, just when you gave up, just when you think you're a fraud and a failure, you let go. And in that moment, it opens up to you. But you have to take yourself to that level where you become obsessed, right? Even a little neurotic, and then you break. Then you break. You break your identity. Because that's what's holding us back, right? Identity. There's that beautiful sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya, the Arahant, the foremost in wisdom, Arahanti, Dhammadina. And there she talks about it. Her husband asked her about identity. The self, or the story that we talk about, this that we think is ourself. So that's a powerful practice. Then there's the beautiful practices of the Vajrayana tradition, especially when you do all the preliminaries, that kind of all the bowing, thousands of prostrations, right? That type of deep devotion, embodiment of the Dhamma. Especially nowadays, I think we need a lot of that because now a lot of Dhamma is up here. Dhamma becomes very intellectual, right? Or maybe Dhamma just becomes too much in the heart. It's all about like loving kindness and compassion. But I feel like the practices of prostrations, which I've done, I haven't done all those thousands. I haven't done the preliminaries. But the times that I have done them, at Zen temples, at Korean Son temples, Vietnamese temples too, it's been beautiful. It's like your whole body, right, gets covered in Dhamma practice instead of like it being up here most of the time or here. Like even your toes, under your toenails, even there, the Dhamma's under your toenails. You think it's just mostly scum under there, right? But no, there's Dhamma there too. It goes through your whole body. So there's other practices, like in the Theravada, we have thinking about the body parts and how they're not beautiful, how they're not attractive. We have the contemplating the corpse, even looking at corpses. If you're lucky enough, you can go to Thailand, and in Thailand, you can sit with a rotting body. Or if you're lucky, you can go to Tibet or Nepal and see them just kind of just leave a body out for the animals to eat. So also beautiful practices, maybe not as accessible to us here. So there's so many practices, but I can't say that I've come across a practice in one of the major traditions that we all are aware of that I can't connect it to the teachings of the Buddha. The essence is there. It doesn't matter. It's kind of like in a similar way if you ask a Chinese Pure Land Buddhist or Tibetan, Karma Kagyu's lineage Buddhist, or you ask a Jodo Shinshu Buddhist from Japan, or you ask a Burmese Buddhist who follows Pa'ok. Everyone in their heart and mind has that same connection to the Buddha, regardless how it manifests in the world. And I think that's what we need to focus on. that connection to the Buddha, regardless of how it looks on the outside, right? We all have that faith to the Buddha. Some of us are a little darker, some of us are lighter, some of us are taller, some of us are shorter. Some of us do pujas, right? Some of us do dana, some of us meditate, some of us study. But that's all just a very unique expression, our own unique expression of the confidence that we have in the Buddha. The important thing is that part on the inside, not how it looks on the outside. Yes. So I love the Dhamma discussion, and in the Q&A, and usually in these circles, there's always more than enough questions. So we can leave more time for questions because, yeah, this is usually when I go to other like more traditional spaces, people are more hesitant to ask questions. But here, I know people love to ask questions, so I'll dedicate more time for that.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Bhante. What an excellent, not only talk, but also really taking us through and being able to experience the different traditions with the various meditation practices. So thank you so much for that presentation. We'll now open the floor to anyone who may have any questions. For those in person, you could just pop up your hands. For those online, you can put up your electronic hand, or you can also pop your questions into the chat. So, any questions? Maybe I'll start it off.
Yes.
It's always the first one, right?
Yes.
And
get the ball rolling.
That's right. Bhante, I really connect with everything that you said today, because even my own practice is a bit like that too. And of course, the way that Metta Centre is set up, it's non-sectarian, very respective of the different traditions and practices. Do you find that with the different practices and the different techniques that's being taught, it's also because people have different personalities and so they can connect in different ways to various things? And so for those who are interested to open up their practice rather than just having one tradition, do you have any tips for them, anything that we may need to look out for so we don't get confused, mixed practices, those kind of things?
Yeah, so I kind of found this metaphor that I've been using. It's one of the hourglass. So if you remember hourglasses, right? They go like this. So I think in the beginning, when we first come into the Dhamma, or actually this works for anything in life. I found it to be true for anything in life. In the beginning, we want to cast a wide net, right? Explore a lot. Taste a little bit of this, taste a little bit of that. Right? And just kind of take in all this knowledge and see what suits us, right? To our own personality and our own inclinations of the mind. So we do this maybe for some time, maybe even years, to be honest. But then there comes a point where you're like, you know, this really resonates with me. This practice really stands out, or I've seen the benefits of this practice. Or it might just be very practical reasons. This is the closest one to my home. I'm going to do this one because it's down the street. Whatever it is, right? But once we make that choice, once we say, I'm going to practice this, then we have to kind of put all the other things to the side. And we dedicate probably years to that practice too. And then once we kind of feel like we're kind of slowing down, or there's some stagnation, or we feel like, okay, now I feel like I have some good understanding, then we open it up again, right? And we start looking at all these other practices to support our current practices that's in the middle. So we have this hourglass in the bottom. We're kind of exploring all these things. We pick one, right? And it starts closing in. That's the little narrow part in the middle, right? And then we come out the other side. We keep that core, but we also open our minds up to bring in all these things from the outside, right? So I think we go through this. Actually, it's not only one hourglass. It's like an hourglass on top of an hourglass on top of an hourglass for like infinitely, right? So through our lives, I think this is how we go. We're kind of open, and then we kind of focus. We feel like we've kind of stagnated or progressing very slowly. And then we kind of spice things up, right? We open it up again. And then we're like, okay, now I feel like this practice is going to be very useful, and you close it up. But I feel that at the same time, there has to be like a thread going down the middle, right? Like this is my core practice throughout you know your whole spiritual journey or training, spiritual training. So I think we also do need some stability. We need an anchor as we go out there, and we're just not kind of like throwing anything in there. Like there's a difference between just getting random food, right, and throwing it in the blender and then drinking it. I mean, it's gonna taste horrible. But you can mix food in such a way that tastes really good, even though it's like completely different things. And that's like where we get like fusion foods, right? Where we pull like a little French, a little Japanese, right? A little in California now, it's very popular to do like Mexican Japanese kind of cuisine, and it tastes really good, right? But you just can't throw anything in there; it won't make any sense, right? So that's how kind of we are with our Dhamma practice. We just don't want to throw everything into the blender and have this horrible concoction that's going to come out. We kind of want to be like a skillful chef, right? And find the good ingredients so we can make this nice fusion, this Dhammic fusion, so we can dish, so we can progress on our path. So those are just a few things that came to mind that I've used in my own practice in order to kind of navigate this situation of like, well, how do I go about doing this? How do I go about doing that? And not just kind of jumping all over the place, right? Or cherry picking. I think that's like something that hinders your practice a lot when you're just kind of jumping around cherry picking is just as bad as just staying closed-minded to one thing. Like these are two extremes that we need to avoid. And maybe if you don't feel comfortable jumping to a completely different tradition, within that tradition, within all traditions, there's so much diversity. So if you're practicing like Mahasisayada, then you can do like Ajahn Brahms techniques, right? Or if you're doing Ajahn Brahms techniques, you can do Pa Auk's techniques. If you're doing Pa Auk's techniques, then maybe you can like go to Asia, go to some small monastery in the jungle and find like some random monk, and he's going to have his own way of teaching. So even within your own tradition, there's so much variety, but you need to open yourself up, especially if you feel that you're not progressing or you're kind of like not at the rate that you would like to progress.
Yeah, that's some really good advice there, and particularly giving time to actually understand and deepen the practice in that particular tradition or technique. Yeah, thank you. We do have a question from someone online, which is, which tradition do you think is the simplest and most effective to achieve nirvana?
None. I don't think there's any tradition in the world. That doesn't mean that I don't think there's a path that is the simplest and best. I do think there is one, but I don't think anyone has it. It's been lost. So whatever the Buddha taught, that very simple, effective, straightest way, it's been lost, to be honest. So everyone, we're kind of like taking a longer way because we lost that direct path that the Buddha made. But I still believe that, most traditions are taking us to where the Buddha wanted us to go. We just don't have the fast path anymore. Yeah.
Why do you think we've lost it?
Anicca vata sankhara. All things are impermanent. So a lot of had to do with the oral tradition, kind of not keeping things the way they were, then writing things down kind of made it worse too. Actually, there's some interesting studies that oral tradition, at least in the Indian context, was a better way to preserve the teachings than writing it down, because writing documents down within a few decades, they get destroyed, and usually only a few people know how to write. Like back in the old days, there was very few people who were literate, very few people who could write, right? So then it's like this very small population who are in control of like the religious texts, instead of like spreading it out. If we all know the songs to Taylor Swift's song, and I change one of the words, it's very easy for you to correct me. But if only me and Tina know the words, we can change one of the words and none of you would know, because we have the power, right? We're the only literate ones writing. So because of this, because of time, because of the Dhamma moving around from place to place, the Dhamma being influenced by external ideas and horrible things like wars and famines, a lot of the things have been lost. So the path is still there. It's just, it has a lot of obstacles, So I think there is one, like with whoever asked the question, I think that's there, but I don't think any tradition has it. Yes, that's my opinion.
No highway pass anymore, huh?
No.
Thank you, Bhante. Another question online. I know two notable monastics who ordained in Theravada, and they both observe bodhisattva vows. I find this really beautiful. Some more orthodox practitioners might criticize this. Would you say this practice would be complementary?
Yes, I myself have bodhisattva vows within the Soto Zen tradition. I have never come across any sutta or any rule that says that that we shouldn't aspire to be a Sammasambuddha. I haven't seen that anywhere where the Buddha says, "Oh, you know what? You shouldn't be a Sammasambuddha. Don't practice Sammas. If you're a monk, you shouldn't practice to be a Sammasambuddha." I've never seen that. He does give an emphasis to get out of samsara as soon as possible, which is the Arahant path, because it doesn't take as long. But I've never seen him even say, "Don't be a Pacceka Buddha." So to me, that's my understanding, right? The way I hold the Bodhisattva vow, that I open my mind up also to being a Sammasambuddha or a Pacceka Buddha or an Arahant Buddha, which is a Savaka Buddha, whatever. I just want to get out. I don't care how I get out. So for me, that's never been a conflict in the way that I see the Bodhisattva vow in the Soto Zen tradition. Sometimes it's held differently, in different traditions, but the way it was explained to me, the way I understand it, the way I live with it, is just opening my mind up to like, hey, I could also become a Sammasambuddha. And that's great, because then I could help even more people. So that's just the way I see it. Maybe, people, but there's a lot of criticism. I've never found any valid reasons for it. Only if you go into the argument where you see in some Vajrayana schools where the vow is held a little bit differently, and they say, "I will not attain awakening until all other beings attain awakening." Then that doesn't make any sense. I would never have taken that Bodhisattva vow, because it's like we all sit around a table, there's food, and I will not eat until someone else eats, and we all make the same vow. I will not eat until they eat. I will not eat until they eat. No one's going to eat. We just sit there forever, and no one's ever tasted anything, right? So in that sense, yes, I think that one is difficult to justify that, to justify, especially when the Buddha told us that we should get out of samsara. So if we're purposely trying to stay and saying we will not go until everyone else goes, then, I think that's a valid criticism. I know there's ways that people say, well, that's more like an intention and aspiration. We don't actually think that you'll end up doing that. Okay, then there's like a little tension there, right? In that kind of way of holding those vows. But at least the way where they're explained to me within this tradition that I took them in, I asked about that. It's like, no, that's not what we're doing. And then when I read it, when I recited to take the vow, it was not that, right? It wasn't this like, I'm going to wait for everyone else to become awakened before I become awakened. That was not in there. So even the different traditions, the Mahayana traditions, Vajrayana traditions, have a different iteration of the Bodhisattva vow. So I think it's just very important that we understand within which tradition we're taking it in and what that means within that tradition. And if we're going to make an outside critique, we should take the time to understand that other traditions vow, instead of just saying, well, since it's not ours, it's wrong. Like, I don't understand it, you're wrong.
I've thought quite a lot about that particular vow because that's really interesting. Would you say it could be because in this practice, it's also about selflessness. It's also about not having the binary and the duality between the sense of me and other. And so when that breaks down, then it actually makes sense that we couldn't have anyone be enlightened without all of us being enlightened. So in that sense, could that be a possible logical reason?
That's one of the ones I've heard for that. The argument for that vow that's very specific, that I will not attain until others. But in many Mahayana schools, that vow is not written that way. So if you don't feel comfortable with that one, there's other ways in Mahayana schools that you can take that vow where it's not that, Because for me, like, if I'm going to commit to something, it needs to make sense to me, Maybe I'm not enlightened enough yet to understand it, like in a kind of in the way I see the world. So to me, I couldn't see myself taking that particular vow in that way, because it just like, it's kind of seems like a contradiction. Yeah.
So what would be the alternative? So for those who are interested in Bodhisattva path, but maybe aren't particularly keen on that vow, so what would be the alternative?
The way I took it in the Soto Zen tradition is that all the way until I reach awakening, and once I reach awakening, I will continue to serve others. I will continue to share the Dhamma, right? All the time. I won't practice selfishly, like completely selfish, right? That's why you don't see me so much like out in the forest alone or doing all this kind of solitary practice, which I did the first couple of years. I wanted to be more engaged. I wanted to dedicate my life more to serving others and sharing what I know. So I kind of made that kind of vow before I actually even took the Bodhisattva vow. And then I came across for example, about the Zen tradition. I was like, oh, this is what I'm already doing anyways. So
might as well.
Might as well, And I always connected with Zen, and it was the first tradition that I actually came into. But that's the way I hold it. The way I hold it is that up until I reach Nirvana, and once I reach Nirvana, I will continue to help others. I will continue to teach the Dhamma. I will not keep the Dhamma to myself. I will not practice only for my own well-being. I will always practice for my well-being, the well-being of others, and the well-being of all, both me and others. Yeah.
Sadhu. That's wonderful. That's a really beautiful aspiration. Thank you, Bhante. Another question from the audience. Is there a difference in being open to different Buddhist traditions and different religions? Or do you recommend also being open to different religions? And if so, how do you experience full faith in the Buddhist doctrine as it might contradict other religions? Not my personal dilemma, but interesting nonetheless.
Yes, I think we should be open in the sense that we're open to understand, we're open to listen, right? We're open to live with, not only tolerate, because we say, oh, we need tolerance in the world. We need to move beyond tolerance. We need to love our neighbors. We need to have compassion for them. It's not enough to tolerate them. We need to care for them and tend to them. So in that sense, yes, we need to be open and to their teachings, right? There's so many things that we have in common with other religions about nonviolence, about caring for others, about wanting to find happiness, And so on those things, yes, we can learn more about them and kind of incorporate those things if they support us in our own Dhamma practice. But if, another religion or philosophy or even a friend tells you to do something that goes against the Dhamma, then don't do it. If it's telling you to harm someone else, it doesn't matter who said it, you shouldn't do it. If it's telling you to harm yourself, you shouldn't do it, right? If it's going to lead to these bad consequences, then just don't do it. It doesn't matter who says it. It doesn't matter if even a Buddhist monk tells you to do it. You shouldn't do it. So my approach is, yes, we should open our minds and learn from others and live with others. And there's other religious practices that we can incorporate as long as they're in line with our own tenets, in line with our own virtue, in line with our own goals in life. But I do want to say also that, there's kind of this popular saying that, all religions are working towards the same thing and we're all, everyone's doing the same. We're not. To do that is also, I think we're not doing anyone a favor by saying that. And I don't think we need that in order for all of us to get along. All we need in order for all religious people to get along is to care for each other as human beings. We don't need to come up with a story like, oh, we're all like trying to head to the same place. All religions are the same. They're all trying to do the same. It's not true. Because in Buddhism, one, we don't have a soul and we don't have a God, like a creator God. That's very different from all other religions, If we try to say this is the same as others, it's not true. It's disingenuous. I understand where it's coming from, of like us wanting to get along. But I don't think we need to go there. We don't need to say that in order for us to get along. All you need to do is care about people. That's all you need to get along with others, is to care about people. It's very basic.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Ajahn Buddhadasa, and what he used to do is he used to not only read so much about the Buddhist teachings and the suttas, but also he used to read from the other religions as well. He knew the Bible, he knew the Quran. So when anyone from any religion or any faith would come and speak with him, he would be able to speak to them. But he would also read it in the context of the Dhamma as well, which was really beautiful in how he was able to respectfully critique and also to add and interpret that and be able to then bring people to the Dhamma, which he didn't see as just a Buddhist teaching, but rather it's the truth, the universal truth. That was very
I love Ajahn Buddhadasa too. I have like 4 of his books.
Yeah, I'm a big fan as well. Great. Okay, just coming to the audience here in person. Any questions? Megan?
Bhante, I was just wondering, in terms of navigating the different spaces for the different traditions, what do you hold core to, or what do you hold strongly to in terms of how to center yourself when you're navigating lots of different teachings and making sense of them?
So I just bring it back to the basics, right? Avoiding all bad, doing good, purifying the mind. This is the teaching of all the Buddhas. In Pali, sabi papase akaranam kusalase upasampada sachite pariyodapenam etam Buddha nusasanam. Zen Center, Japanese Zen Center, same thing when I'm there. Avoid the bad, do the good, purify the mind. Right? I go visit a Korean Zone Center, same thing. I go visit a Pure Land Center in Vietnam, same thing. That's the core, right? That's the core. And then when I talk with other monks, I ask questions about those core aspects about, how do we hold the precepts? How do we avoid harming others? How do we do good? How do we practice generosity and compassion? And you'll get like beautiful things that you've never thought of, like such simple ways, different ways that people, get these core teachings of the Buddha and manifested that we're kind of very limited, in our own perspective of the practicing. Once you start like opening yourself up to these different traditions, I mean, it's sometimes our practice is limited just because we don't know how to do the practice or because we think it only has to be this way. And I think by going into other spaces, you just get more choices of doing what you're already doing, right? So like you have your core practice and you need to be sincere and genuine to that. But there's other ways to bring this intention into action, right? To bring this feeling that we have or this understanding, to bring it into the world in different ways. But when I talk with other monks from other places, I usually talk about like Four Noble Truths, Eightfold Path. And I just keep it in these basic things. And I don't try to like go, well, should you meditate with your eyes open or closed? Do we face the wall or not face the wall? Like that's, to me, that's petty stuff, like, oh, should we do this offering first to the Buddha or this offering should go first, There's been schisms in Buddhism over the way you offer things to the Buddha, like these ceremonies. Monks would not sit with each other because the ritual is done in the wrong way. That's ridiculous to me, Like, so I think we should just always stick to like Four Noble Truths, Eightfold Path, avoiding all bad, doing the good, and purifying the mind, or whatever you feel is like the core teachings of the Buddha for you and are working for you. Wherever you go, you take that and you'll see it in these places. And then just take it in if it works for you. And if it doesn't work for you, then you just push it away. Because I've stayed in so many different temples, different traditions, even places where I don't know what they're saying, because there's a deep language barrier. But I've always found all the monks to be so generous, so kind, all the lay people to be so generous. I've never had a bad experience in any monastery that I've stayed anywhere in the world with any type of tradition. I've even gone to places that people consider like kind of not really Buddhist, there's this place. I mean, they get a bad rap, the Soka Gakkai, but every time I went to visit them, they're very nice. Soka Gakkai, Nichiren Buddhism. I've never had any bad experience. And one of my good friends has been practicing for many years within that. It's more of a lay practice. He's an amazing person, and we have great talks. And I even invited him to have a discussion in Spanish because he speaks Spanish, and we've had actually a couple of them and posted them online. And I've always found everything to be in agreement. So I think sometimes the limitations are more in our head than in actuality. And if a person's really practicing Buddhism, they're always going to have that concern for the well-being of others, regardless, And I think that's how you could tell if someone is really embodying the Dhamma, right? They'll care about you. They'll have that concern for your own well-being. If you start seeing someone that's like, mean and a jerk, maybe they want to be practicing the Dhamma, but they're not completely there yet. So I think we should focus more on people's behavior. I mean, even the Buddha told us, if you want to know if someone's awakened or not, you should live with them for 6 months, right? He didn't say like, oh, you should see how many suttas they can chant or how long they can sit in meditation, right? So I think what I'm saying is invitation to go into other spaces, right? And not feel like you have to buy in and sell yourself out, but also to be open to take in things that support your own authentic and sincere way of holding the Dhamma.
Thank you, Bhante. Now, we do have another question, which does talk about some differences between traditions.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one that really does exist. Hi, Bhante, can you please speak to the dilemma about ordination of Buddhist nuns across traditions? Mm-hmm. Why does this exist? And what is the right way according to the Buddha?
Yeah, so The way that most of the rules are understood, regardless if it's Mahayana or Vajrayana or Theravada, is that when a new rule comes out, it kind of sets a new precedence. And even though if things were different in the past, if they were allowable, now we need to go by this new rule standard, right? So in the beginning, they didn't need monks to ordain nuns. All right, Ananda ordained the first group of nuns. But then after some time, it doesn't say like, the dates. There was a situation where one of the nuns, potential future nuns, felt uncomfortable disclosing personal information to the monks. So then they asked the Buddha, well, can she tell a nun? And then that nun will tell the senior monk, and then, we can do the ordination that way. I mean, it's a very long story. I'm trying to make it as short as possible. But basically what happened after that is that they say, well, now from this day forward, you need both monks and nuns for the ordination, which wasn't the case in the beginning. And then since the Bhikkhuni lineage kind of died out, both in not only in Theravada, but also in other traditions like in Tibet, we don't have the other group, which is the Bhikkhunis, because they had to be like a Bhikkhus and Bhikkhunis to do the higher ordination to give that one. But since there is no Bhikkhunis, it makes it difficult. But then one of the arguments is like, well, in the beginning, we didn't need this, right? Because the Buddha let Ananda himself just ordain without other nuns there. Like it could just happen that way. They didn't need to add the nuns to ordain them. They could just be ordained straight from a bhikkhu, from the bhikkhus group. So, which one is right? We don't know because we don't have the Buddha to ask. These things would get solved by the Buddha. During the time of the Buddha, the monks would just go ask the Buddha. Yeah, so it depends if we want to go, this even in, Tina, there's the spirit of the law and the way it's written, right?
The black letter of the law.
The way it's written makes it seem like we cannot do it.
Yeah.
If we just very strict, it doesn't seem like we can do it in any of the traditions. The spirit definitely says we can. So which side are you going to take, And I think that's one of the things that Buddhist people in the world now, as a community, the international community of Buddhists, this is one of the things that's very important for the future of Buddhism. And we need to figure it out.
Yeah.
But we need to be patient, because if you look at the history of Buddhism, these debates take hundreds of years to get solved. So let's proceed with caution, and when Buddhism came to China, it took hundreds of years for things to get figured out there. Even when it came to Sri Lanka, it took hundreds of years for things to get figured out there. But in the West, we're spoiled. We're privileged. We're used to having everything now and demanding everything now. I want it now, right? So I think this also comes into Buddhism. I mean, and there is a great intention why we want it now is because we care about women. We want these women to have the path to freedom, So the intention is great, but in actuality, in the real world, things take time. Things take time. Even the best intentions to help people take time, and we need to hold that. We need to hold that tension of like, we're going to do something, and we're not gonna give up. But at the same time, realize that it's going to take time. Just like you can't force a tree to grow or a person to grow at a certain rate. They're going to grow the way they're going to grow. But in that growth process, we can give it the best resources, right? The best conditions for it to grow. So that's just kind of my own perspective. And I myself have been part of ordination of a bhikkhuni, right? So that lets you know where I fall on it. But I do understand that if we go by the letter, yes, right? So it just depends which side are you going to go on.
Thank you,
Yes.
Bhante. Thank you. And thank you for that really succinct answer to something that is actually very complicated. And so thanks for presenting both views as well for that. Okay, we have a very practical question now. Hi, Bhante. I'm finding it very difficult to get sound sleep. Are there any Buddhist techniques to improve it?
So the Buddha talks about practicing loving kindness. One of the benefits of practicing, there's a list of the benefits of practicing loving kindness. And he says that one of them is that you go to sleep on, like, quickly, you won't have any nightmares, and you'll wake up on time. So there's like three sleep-related benefits for the practice of loving kindness, right there. Outside of that, within the Theravada tradition, I can't think of any that would directly be associated with sleeping. There's ways to practice. I don't know if it actually helps you sleep, but there's ways in which you can meditate right before sleep, during sleep, and coming out within the Tibetan tradition, the Vajrayana Tibetan tradition, forms of like yoga nidra, which are very similar to like the kind of Indian versions. Has more to do with like lucidity of dreaming, but it will increase from what I've heard, your quality of sleep, right? But yeah, for some reason, it doesn't seem to be that big of an emphasis on sleep at those times. I mean, they didn't have cell phones at that time, and they didn't have like blue light everywhere. So I don't think it was that big of a deal for them. And they had to walk into town. People worked hard. They were all like farmers. They were exhausted. Imagine being like the servant of a lord and you have to like work all day in the fields. You want more breaks. Like falling asleep wasn't a problem for them. So I think it just hadn't been an issue. But I do think that practicing loving kindness, there's a monk, Bhante Sumita, very senior monk, and he has online, I think he even posted it, Bhante Sumita, Dhamma USA. He has a meditation on like a loving kindness body scan, combining a body scan with the practice of loving kindness. I think he has over 100 videos, so I can't find it right away. I don't know where it's at, but I think if you would look or send him an email to Dhamma USA, and he could share that meditation with you. And I know people who have practiced it personally, at least 3 people, and they told me they were able to sleep very well. Yes.
Great recommendation.
Yes.
Okay. What about gurus? So the guru tradition in the Tibetan tradition. Have you come across that? Have you practiced that? Have you taken a guru? How does that fit in?
Yeah. I think this word is a loaded term nowadays, especially in the West, right? Like it has a negative feeling to it. Like, but guru just means your teacher, right? It's an acharya. That's all it means. But because of like the interactions between India and the US and new religious movements or cults, whatever we want to call them, right? And kind of abuses of power, now guru has become like a dictator or something, religious dictator, right? That's what it kind of means. But guru just means a teacher. So let's not say guru, let's say teacher, right? And let's say a teacher that says, well, in order to really be able to properly practice the way I teach, you kind of need to dedicate yourself, right? To just me, to only training with me. And we find this, like I did martial arts my whole life. And I had my guru, my sensei, like, my sifu, if I was doing Chinese or Japanese martial arts, right? And I mean, with anyone who we train, it's always up on us to use discretion and use our own kind of like judgment to see if it's beneficial or not. And yeah, I do think there's a purpose. There is a place for having a primary teacher and dedicating maybe even years just to the way that they teach, if you want their particular results, right? If you're not interested in what they teach, then don't go study with them. You shouldn't even be there to begin with, right? But if you are interested in, then you need to dedicate yourself to them, right? Just like if you really love someone or you really care about them, and there's some sort of like romantic feeling for them, then you would want to be with them exclusively, only with them, and you get into a relationship only with them. You're not going to be like, well, let's get married. I really love you. I only want to be with you. I don't love other people, but I also want to sleep around. Okay, no, then maybe marriage is not for us, or a different type of marriage will be better for us. So I think all relationships are kind of like this, right? There's some sort of commitment in any kind of relationship with whether it's friendship or whether it's professional or academic. All relationships come with like some conditions, right? And the one with the teacher is the same thing. It's the same thing. And then it's just on us to see if the container in which the teacher or the way he teaches or the limitation that he puts in suits us, right? If it suits you, then go for it. If it doesn't suit you, then you don't have to do it. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Bhante. Another question about meditation. When you first practice, have you ever been stuck with no improvement in your meditation? If you have, then do you have any tips on how to improve our focus or concentration and reduce internal distractions?
Yes, I did get stuck practicing Anapanasati. It was in my like first to second year of being a monastic. And it's just because I kind of fetishized it, you know, I became obsessed with it, and that's all I was doing. And I was kind of neglecting all the other practices like loving kindness. I wasn't practicing it at all, or only when we were like doing the kind of like Friday night meditation when everyone's invited to the temple and people walk in from the street. Then we teach all the meditations. But outside of that, I was only doing Anapanasati all the time. And at the same time, I was only doing sutta study. So there was only two things that I was doing. And then I just started feeling like really claustrophobic and very tense. And I was trying to push, like I was trying to push my practice. Like, I need to reach this level. I need to reach the jhana, especially. I was like so obsessed with reaching the first jhana. And it just made things worse. Like the more obsessed I became, the more limited, the more I pushed on it, the more it pushed me back. And then I just had to be like, whatever then. And I started saying, okay, I'm going to do like half and half now. Half like Brahma Viharas, loving kindness, and half Anapanasati. And then when I started doing that, I saw like actually my Anapanasati started getting better. Right. And then when I stopped focusing so much on only like reading suttas for 5 or 6 hours a day and like started doing simple things like cleaning the temple feels so great. Like it's magical because you're doing something for others. You know, people come there, they get to enjoy it. And then you also like clean the Buddha and things like that. And then I think like, oh, imagine someone like really has to go to the bathroom and they come to the temple and they're thinking, I really need to go. And then they see a nice clean toilet seat. And the bathroom's so nice and clean, it's fresh, and they can relieve themselves, you know, without like having to worry like, oh, I need to put some paper there, or like, I don't want to sit down there. I'm gonna kind of, you know, like, and that made my Anapanasati practice easier because I started making Anapanasati not only about me, but about the benefit of all, right? The metta was helping me think about how can I help others. Cleaning the temple was helping me, how can I think about others? When I was studying, I was very selfish. It was for me. For my own liberation. When I was practicing Anapanasati, it was only for me, for my own liberation, right? So I think these practices helped me open my mind to think, oh no, you know what? When I do something, it shouldn't only just be for me. I mean, obviously, there's going to be more of a tilt that way because we're all self-centered. But I should take into consideration at least the well-being of others too, and there should be some sort of like benefit for others too. The benefit shouldn't only be for me. And just opening my mind, having that shift in view, right? Right view is so important. Having that shift in view and that perspective and intention. What was my chetana, right? Like that really helped me. So I think it's just what I said way earlier about opening up. If you ever feel stuck, like you're not progressing, then you need to stop being stubborn, stop running into the same wall. We try to force things. And I know, especially me at that time, I was a young guy coming out of the military in martial arts, and I was just fighting. I came into the Dhamma fighting, throwing fists and kicks and trying to fight my way all the way up to Nibbana and force my way there. But that's not the way to Nibbana. That's just the way to more dukkha, but a justified way of doing it, right? Like I could find many excuses for me doing that. Yes. Okay.
Someone's given you a tick of approval. Great answer, Bhante. Well said. Thank you. And indeed, well said. Thank you so much for the talk, Bhante. Just as a final comment, there's actually a Zen teacher. I don't know if you know him, Kihu Sunim from Jongbopsa. It's a Korean Buddhist temple, and it's just right here in Belfield, very close to where we are sitting. And if you haven't met him, I encourage you to meet him before you leave Sydney. He is a Zen master, and he is a great supporter of Metta Centre, and we go and visit him. But his main practice is actually the koan practice. And his koan is Who Am I? And he's practiced it to the extent where not only from the moment he wakes up to when he sleeps, but even in his dreams. It is just, who am I?
Yes.
So that's the extent.
Sorry, Bhante, do you remember Venerable Soul Sunim? You stayed in that Jongbopsa Korean temple once.
So
the main teacher.
Yeah.
Oh, the main teacher.
The main
Yeah,
teacher.
yeah. So the main teacher. You've never met the main teacher, but the main. Oh. So this is the same group.
Okay. Thank you, Sensen.
Yeah. So if you ever get a chance to meet him, we always love to go and meet him and pay respects to him. He's very well practiced.
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you so much for your sharing of the Dhamma today. Really appreciate all of the teachings, the practices, the guided meditation, and also answering all of our questions as well. And of course, thank you to all the beautiful Metta Centre audience with your excellent questions as usual. And I'm really looking forward to more of your talks, which is coming up. And Simpson will give us some announcements shortly. But Bhante, as a way to wrap up the session, could you lead us in a dedication of merit?
Yes. So we will dedicate our practice today to our own well-being, practice inner compassion, since some of us are a little overcritical of ourselves. So by the power of this meritorious deeds, may we be free from bad company, and may we always have good friends until we attain Nibbana. Imina punya kamena Mame bala samagamo satam samagemo hotu yaveni bhanapatiya.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, Bhante. And now I'm going to hand over to Sinsin, who will be making some announcements for us today.
Yeah, thank you, Tina, and thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante. Thank you, Tina. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night. Good night. So I just wanted to make a quick announcement. So we have one last session with Bhante Sanathavihari actually next Monday. So next Monday will be the last session, and it's going to be held. It's going to be done online only because next Monday, the 27th of January, is a public holiday. So it's going to be online only. This coming Wednesday, we're going to have Jim Teo in the Parramatta campus, and it's a hybrid event as well. So you can check out the information later on our website. And next Wednesday, we're going to have a visiting monastic from Sri Lanka called Venerable Bhante Sadajiva. So we don't really know the topic yet, but you'll find out later on. But there is something quite special that I'd like to mention here as well. Because many of you probably know that Bhante Sujato has been away in Europe for the past 3 months. He's coming back on the 7th of February. And we also have another visiting monastic from America called Venerable Jagaro. And also a visiting monastic from Indonesia called Venerable Bhante Santacito. They'll all be coming on the same day. So on the 8th of February, we're going to have a farewell and welcome sunset meditation gathering to bid farewell to Bhante Sanathavihari and to also welcome Bhante Sujato and Bhante Jagaro to Australia. We're going to be doing some meditation at sunset overlooking Baintree Bay, close to Chatswood, not far from Chatswood at all. So if you're interested, please let me know, and I can give you all the details. It's going to be at 5:30 on the 8th of February. That's the Saturday, if you're interested.
Great, thank you so much, Sinsin. And also we have another speaker who's coming from overseas. It's Venerable Dr. Vimoka. He has previously come many times to Australia, and each time he comes, he loves to give teachings at the Metta Centre. So he will be giving some of these Monday and Wednesday sessions, but also he'll be running a 2-day urban meditation retreat. So where you attend from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. on the Saturday and the Sunday. That's on the 22nd to the 23rd of February, and that will be at the Australian Centre of English, which is in the city of Sydney, right in the middle next to Hyde Park. So I hope you can join for some of these events, and more information is all on our website. So thank you all so much for participating in our very first Dhamma talk for the year, and many, many more to come. So thank you, and I hope you have a good night. Thank you again so much, Bhante.
Yes, bye-bye.
Bye.
Have a good night. Hope you sleep well.